Hello and welcome to Marketing and Consumer Behaviour, Buyer Behaviour. In this tutorial, we're going to explain the influences upon consumer and business buyer behaviour, explain the consumer and business buyer process, analyse the decision-making unit and its importance in the business world, and understand the role of marketing in influencing buyer behaviour. Now, buyer behaviour is a very large topic, and I'm going to do my best in this tutorial to cover quite a large area. There is a lot of additional reading on buyer behaviour in your Principles of Marketing textbooks that will support this tutorial. In looking at the first concept, consumer buyer behaviour, there are a lot of factors that influence consumers in what they buy and how they buy. Some of those factors that we need to consider as marketers are cultural, social, buyers' response, such as the experience they've had before, environmental influences, marketing programs, personal and psychological. In highlighting a couple of these now, cultural, the country that you come from, the class that you come from, the education that you've had, this will all dictate the products that you buy. The household that you grew up in, your parents' influence and attitudes to money will obviously impact your thoughts in later life. From a personal point of view, age and your life cycle is very important because obviously 20-year-olds are going to be buying very different products to a 40-year-old who's married with a child, might find that a lot of their disposable income is going on nappies and baby formula rather than fast cars or night clubbing. So it's important as a marketer to have a real understanding of what the influences might be on your target market and try and reach out to them. Obviously, in environmental influences, what's ever going on in the economy, politically, economically, technologically, will also impact the consumer. And if the economy is good and people have a large disposable income, then they're obviously going to be buying a lot more goods. Buyer's response is also interesting on the right-hand side, to do with branding of a product, the experience that a consumer has had before, and also the channels that are available. If you've only got one store and it's actually quite difficult to buy that product, then you might find that consumers are turning to buy other products and other brands online. So as you can see, there are quite a lot of factors influencing consumer behaviour, and you need to have an understanding of what they are. In looking at them in a little bit more detail, psychological influences on buyer behaviour are very important, and it's to do with the motivation and perception and learning of a product, and it's really how your consumers perceive your brand, and it's also to do with motivation, and this comes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you have a look at Maslow's hierarchy, you can see at the bottom that obviously people who are concerned with food and shelter and getting the basics in life are not going to be interested in buying a new BMW. As we move further up that Maslow hierarchy in developed Western countries where the need for food and shelter is not as great, people have more disposable income and they're very interested in how they're perceived, they're interested in trying new things. We consider how our tribes see us. And sometimes the products we buy, we feel, help people to form an opinion of us. So there's a lot of psychological influences. If I buy this product, I will feel better, I will have a better life. And marketers obviously tap into that to influence consumer buyer behaviour. Personal influences are very important, and I touched on this in the previous slide, to do with age and occupation, education, your economic situation. Obviously, you need to know these facts about your consumers because then you can actually talk to them in a language that resonates with them and influences them to buy. Obviously, cultural influences play a really large part in terms of how a product is consumed or perceived. Obviously, social class plays a part as well. That will influence the types of products and services that consumers are buying. Social influences are also very important when it comes to buyer behaviour. And if you think about it, when you're going to buy a product, you quite often ask the advice of your family or your friends to ask them what they think and run it by them. So consumer behaviour is influenced by social factors such as your friends and your family, but it's also influenced by support groups. So for example, for me, I might look at the Chartered Institute of Marketers or the local photographers group or Which magazine to actually establish, not only from my friendship groups, but also from authority groups about whether or not this product or service is best to be bought. In the model of buyer behaviour, we are trying to think about what the buyer decision process is, what the characteristics are, and how we can actually influence them as a marketer. On the left-hand side, we have our marketing mix, and these are the main tools that we will use to influence the consumer. They're also being influenced by external factors from the PESTLE analysis, such as what's going on in the wider environment. We can't really influence that, but we need to fight off our competitors. We're assuming that consumers will still buying to some extent, and we need to make sure that they're buying our product and service rather than theirs. If we can influence buyer behaviour through the buyer decision process, we can get them to choose our brand over others. So it's really important to have an understanding of what that buying decision process is. So here it is now. This is called the buyer decision process, and there are 5 stages from need recognition all the way through to post-purchase decision. This model or diagram assumes that when a consumer buys a product or a service, they will go through these 5 stages in a logical format from beginning to end. The first stage is need recognition, and this is when the consumer realizes that they would like to buy a new product or service. This need can be triggered from an external source, such as seeing a marketing campaign or a leaflet through the mail. It might be seeing a billboard on the way to work. You're travelling in Melbourne to the train. You see an ad for a Whitsunday holiday island. You suddenly feel weary. Yes, I need a holiday. Need recognition can also be triggered by internal factors such as hunger, I'm starving, I need a donut, or embarrassment, such as someone getting into your car and saying, I can't believe you've still got this old wreck of a car, and feeling a bit embarrassed, thinking, maybe it's time I upgraded my car. So need recognition can be stimulated by internal and external factors. Once you know that you want that new product or service, whether it's a car, a donut, or a holiday, you start to do information search. And this means that you have a heightened awareness. You actually start looking for advertising or information about this product. You start looking online, you talk to your friends, especially if it's a product with high involvement, such as a holiday, where you're going to be spending a lot of money. So you might look at brochures, you might ring companies, you might go online, you ask your friends what holiday they've been on. Okay, so this is heightened information period. You as a marketer need to make sure that your information is ready and available for the consumer to read and browse, and it needs to be easy to understand. Once the consumer's gathered all of that information, there's a process that they go through in the evaluation of alternatives, and that's deciding between you and the competitor. Now, some consumers will make the decision very quickly, some will do a pros and cons list, some will spend weeks, even years, going through all of the information between your product or another. So as a marketer, you need to make sure that your unique value proposition stands out, that they understand why your product is better than the competitor product, that they can see that it's easy to purchase, that you have a channel that people can get in contact with you and ask you questions. Those things are really important to guide the consumer towards the purchase decision. Now they've decided to purchase, stage 4. Purchase needs to be easy, there needs to be a number, they need to be able to pay, they need to be able to see how it's going to be delivered or a store that they're going to. And once they've purchased it, they will then ask themselves, did I do the right thing? Does the product or service perform at the level that I am looking for? Because if not, they're then going to badmouth you to others. So it's very important that all of these 5 stages are followed and that you as a marketer think through about how you can influence those stages. A few quick things to remember here. Not all consumers go through these stages in a logical manner. So some start with need recognition and go straight through to purchase decision. Some people go backwards and forwards. So you might gather all the information, decide it's not for you, decide to go back to information search again. So don't assume that all consumers will follow the process in a very logical manner, because it doesn't work like that. But this is a good process for you to have an understanding as a marketer in how you might influence the process. Now we're looking at consumer buying roles. And it's important to remember that when a consumer is buying something, it's usually not just one person in the family who is making that decision, and that people within the buying unit have different roles and help to contribute towards the decision. So when you're buying a product, you might have an initiator. So there might be someone in the family who says, I think we need to get a new brand of cereal, or why don't we go on holiday? That initiator is receiving information from the outside world. Maybe they've read something in the newspaper and they tell the buying unit or the family that it would be a good idea to get that product. The influencer might be the initiator. It might be someone else in the family. So mum might be the initiator, the dad might be the influencer who says, no, I don't think so, we don't have enough money, we already went on holiday. But it's important for you to have an understanding about who the influencer is and who the initiator is. And breakfast cereal companies are very, very good at this. So they know that their cereals have to appeal to mum and they have to appeal to the children. So a lot of work goes into the packaging in reinforcing the messages around nutrition and health. And then a lot of work goes in making the packages funky and fun so that the kids pick them up off the shelves. Then we'll have the decider, the person in the family who has the budget, who decides, yes, we will go ahead. And the buyer, the person who actually makes the purchase, can be the mum or the dad. And the whole family might be the users, or it might just be the children who are the users. So breakfast cereal, mum's the initiator, dad might be the influencer. She decides, she buys it, and the kids are the users. So everyone's playing a slightly different part in the puzzle. So you as a marketer need to have an understanding, who are these people, what parts do they play, and how can I influence them? Now, when it comes to business buying, it's a totally different kettle of fish. With consumer buying, you're likely to have fewer people in the mix. It might be one person, it might be a family. There's a lot of emotional stuff happening with consumer purchasing. It might be quick, it might be fast, it might not be that much money. But when it comes to business buying, it's very different because it's large sums, it's for business use. There are going to be fewer suppliers, and there's probably going to be a lot more people in the decision-making process. There are a lot of influences on business buying, and starting from the left-hand side, we've got a lot of environmental influences, such as the cost of money, what's going on from a technological viewpoint, what's going on in the pestle environment, to do with the economy, what's going on with competition. That will affect a business decision to buy. And then we've got organizational factors, such as the setup of the business, what the company is trying to achieve, the policies and procedures that it's put in place. And obviously, from a personal buying point of view, there's going to be maybe a purchasing officer or a manager, and they might be influenced or swayed depending on the culture of the business and their personality. So business buying, by its very nature, is a lot more complex than consumer buying. And as we can see here, the consumer process was 5 stages. Here, we've got more like 8 stages. Because the business process is a lot more complex, it actually starts with a problem recognition rather than a need recognition. Because when a business is buying a product or a service, they're actually buying it to fulfill a business need, not a personal need. So the business needs to understand what is the problem. Our productivity needs to be increased with printing. And quite often then they will go out to a supplier who will then put forward a bid. They need to get product specifications. They've got to find a supplier. And sometimes a business will only deal with 1 or 2 suppliers at a time. You might be in that listing, you might not. So they might turn to suppliers and ask them to quote or bid. Okay, and the whole process is about choosing, ordering the right amount, performance review. So the buy grid framework is a little bit different, much longer, many more people involved. And really just depends on whether it's a straight rebuy, it's for stationery, chewing gum, electricity, gas, straight rebuy, or whether it's a modified rebuy or a completely new task. If it's a new task, it's a new product, it's a new service, it's going to be a much longer process in finding suppliers and going through that buying situation. The participants in the buying process have very similar names, and this is called the decision-making unit. In the decision-making unit, you are going to have gatekeepers, and those people really are the guardians of the information. You need to get through a gatekeeper to make sure that everybody else in the decision-making unit receives the information that you want to get to them as a marketer. Sometimes the gatekeeper's a receptionist, sometimes it's a purchasing officer, sometimes it's a CMO. But you need to know who the gatekeeper is. You need to try and establish a relationship with them in order to get the information to the rest of the buyer group. And in the same way as the consumer process, you have users, influencers, buyers, and deciders. So if you were deciding on putting in a whole new printing system into the marketing department, you're going to have a gatekeeper. So you might have an influencer who's the chief marketing officer. You might have a decider who's the financial controller, because they decide that yes, we do have enough budget to buy all of the printers that marketing needs. The buyers might be a purchasing officer who places the order, and the users are actually the marketing department themselves. So in a small company, there might be 1 or 2 people in the buying process, and in a very large company, you could have 20 people in the buying process. Whatever it is, you need to know as a marketer, because you're going to need to influence that process. Another important thing with the buying process, and this is to do with the messages that you give as a marketer, you need to be aware of who you are talking to in the buying process. And if you look on the right hand side, we have the typical purchasing members, such as a warehouse manager, purchasing manager, logistics manager, chief marketing officer. And on the left hand side, we have all the typical benefits that we could talk to the decision-making unit about. And this is important because, as we can see here, certain members of the decision-making unit are only interested in certain messages and not others. So as we can see, the purchasing manager would be very interested in an internet-based order placement and tracking and billing system. Okay, and then we can also see that something else, just-in-time delivery, is something that the CFO and supply chain head would be really interested in, as well as the logistics manager. The willingness to handle changes in customer needs with 12 hours notice is something that the factory manager and the chief marketing officer are very interested in. So there's a couple of key points here with what's called the benefit stack in the decision maker is A, you need to know who these people are. Secondly, you need to be clear as a marketer about what your key messages are going out to the decision-making unit. 3, you need to make sure that those people within the buying processes hear the messages that they want to hear, because they're not going to be interested in messages that are not relevant to them. So in thinking through buyer behaviour and the decision-making units, think through whether it's organisational behaviour or whether it's consumer behaviour. Consider the attitudes, the influences and opinions of all the people in the decision-making unit. Consider the risk. Is this a large involvement product, or is it a smaller a modified buy or straight rebuy, because that will affect the involvement and the time involved in the decision-making process. So for our learning check, what are the influences upon consumer and business buyer behaviour? What are the stages in the consumer and business buying process? What are the components of the decision-making unit? And what is the role of marketing in influencing buyer behaviour? Thank you.